They say the world doesn't stop for anyone. But on one bitter December night, in a nearly empty diner on the edge of nowhere, time paused. Not because of a storm. Not because of a tragedy. But because one man chose to care when no one else would. He didn't know her name. Didn't know she was one of the most powerful women in America. He only knew she needed help. And that single choice, quiet, human, real, changed 2 lives forever. Before we dive into today's story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. If you love heartfelt stories with a twist, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. We've got another emotional ride coming your way tomorrow, and trust me, you won't want to miss it. Let's begin. Ethan Monroe never dreamed big. At 28, he found comfort in the familiar rhythm of pouring coffee, wiping down booths, and greeting the same truck drivers and night owls at Maple Hill Diner, tucked along a quiet road in rural Vermont. The job didn't pay much, but it gave him peace, something he hadn't felt since his parents passed years ago. The diner wasn't glamorous. The neon sign buzzed faintly. The coffee tasted burnt more often than not. But it was home. Ethan was the kind of man who remembered your order after one visit and asked about your dog by name. He worked the graveyard shift, when the world slowed down and the cold crept in through the cracks. One particularly harsh December night, with snow piling up outside and the roads nearly deserted, Ethan's shift felt quieter than usual. That was, until he heard a strange sound, like a faint thud, from the back of the diner. Curious and slightly concerned, he followed the noise to the women's restroom. What he found would change his life in ways he couldn't imagine. A woman, collapsed on the cold tile floor, barely conscious. Ethan didn't hesitate. He gently pushed open the restroom door, calling out softly, "Ma'am? Are you okay?" When there was no response, he stepped inside, careful not to startle her. The woman on the floor was pale, trembling, her breath shallow. Her coat was soaked with melted snow, and her fingertips were icy to the touch. He wrapped her in his flannel jacket and flagged down the only other person in the diner, a trucker named Gary, for help calling 911. But Gary just shook his head. "She's probably drunk or high. You don't need that kind of trouble, kid." But Ethan didn't listen. He knelt beside her and whispered, "You're gonna be okay, all right? Just hang on." He grabbed his car keys, helped her up, and drove her to the nearest hospital himself, nearly 20 miles through winding, snow-covered roads. In the emergency room, he stayed with her until she stabilized. Her name, according to her ID, was Olivia Walker. No emergency contacts. No clue why she had ended up alone in a diner bathroom that night. The nurses said she was lucky he'd found her when he did. A few more minutes, and things could have gone very differently. Ethan returned to the diner the next night, tired but calm. He didn't tell anyone what happened. He didn't need thanks. For him, it was simple: someone needed help, and he was there. What he didn't know was that Olivia hadn't forgotten. A week later, she walked into Maple Hill Diner again. This time, dressed down in jeans and a heavy scarf, almost unrecognizable. She sat at the counter, ordered black coffee, and watched Ethan from behind her cup. There was something different about him, the way he smiled at strangers, the way he listened, the way he treated everyone like they mattered. She remembered his kindness, not just in saving her life, but in the way he had looked at her that night, not with judgment, but with genuine concern. She paid in cash and left without a word. But she'd be back. Because Olivia Walker wasn't just any woman. She was the founder and CEO of Hearthstone Group, America's most prestigious fine dining empire. And something about that small-town server had stirred something in her that money and titles never could. Olivia kept returning. At first, it was once a week. Then twice. Always in the late evening, always in disguise, no makeup, old jeans, and a wool cap pulled low over her eyes. She became a regular at Maple Hill Diner, always sitting at the same stool near the window, always ordering black coffee with a side of rye toast. Ethan noticed her, of course. You don't work graveyard shifts without recognizing patterns. But he never pried. He greeted her like anyone else, with a warm smile and a refill before she even asked. Their conversation started small: the weather, the coffee, the strange characters who came in after midnight. Over time, the conversations deepened. Books. Family. Regret. Dreams. Neither pushed, but something quiet and honest grew between them. Olivia found herself drawn to Ethan's calm presence, his lack of pretense. He didn't talk about ambition or status. He asked real questions. Listened. He made her laugh, something she hadn't done in months. Running a business empire had drained her, made her feel invisible outside of boardrooms and press releases. But here, she felt seen. And Ethan, though careful, felt something too. He didn't know who Olivia truly was. But he sensed she was running from something, or maybe towards something, and he admired her strength in the silence she carried. One night, they stayed after closing, talking under the soft hum of the diner's old fluorescent lights. It felt like something unspoken had been acknowledged. Like the space between them had shifted. But everything shattered the next week. A food blogger passing through snapped a photo of Olivia as she exited the diner. The image went viral. Is that Olivia Walker, the Hearthstone CEO, dining at a Vermont truck stop? The article blew up overnight. Ethan saw the photo. Then the headlines. Then the truth. He didn't say anything. He didn't show up to work the next night. No message. No goodbye. Olivia returned to the diner the following evening, heart pounding, only to find his shift covered and his locker empty. She had wanted to tell him herself. She had wanted to explain. But now, all she could do was sit in the booth where they last talked, wondering if the truth had broken something too fragile to fix. For days, Olivia waited. She came back every evening, hoping Ethan would reappear, maybe just once more, to talk, to ask questions, to let her explain. But the diner felt emptier without him. Even the regulars noticed. That young guy, Ethan, he quit. Gary, the trucker, asked one night, half interested. Olivia just nodded, her throat too tight to answer. She returned to her penthouse in Manhattan, but the city lights felt dimmer now. Her phone buzzed non-stop: public relations, board members, press inquiries. Everyone wanted to know why she was hanging out in a roadside diner in Vermont. But none of them asked the only question that mattered: why did she feel so lost without him? Late one night, unable to sleep, Olivia sat down at her kitchen table and pulled out a pen and paper. Not a phone. Not an email. Something about this needed to be real. She wrote slowly, deliberately, not to apologize, not to justify, but to tell the truth. You saw me when I didn't want to be seen. You didn't care who I was, and that made me feel human again. You reminded me that kindness doesn't ask for anything in return. And you didn't need to be anyone else to matter, not to me. I don't know if this changes anything. I just wanted you to know, you matter. Title or no title, diner or boardroom, you have value. And I never forgot what you did for me. She signed it simply, Olivia. She mailed it to the diner, not knowing if he'd ever read it, or care. Back in Vermont, Ethan had taken time off to clear his head. The revelation of Olivia's identity hit him harder than he expected. It wasn't that she was rich or famous, it was that she hadn't told him. He didn't know if what they shared had been real, or part of some story she was writing for herself. But when he returned to the diner to collect his final paycheck, the manager handed him an envelope. No return address. Just his name, written in familiar handwriting. He opened it. And read every word. Twice. And then, he smiled. Not because everything made sense now, but because something in those words felt truer than anything he'd heard in years. 2 weeks later, Olivia returned to the diner one last time, more out of habit than hope. She didn't expect anything. The booth near the window, once theirs, felt like a memory frozen in time. But then she heard it. A familiar voice behind the counter. Black coffee, no sugar. Rye toast, extra crispy. Still your thing. She turned. Ethan was there, wearing that same worn apron, same gentle smile, but something in his eyes had shifted. He looked steadier now, like a man who had found clarity, not answers. Olivia stood up, unsure of what to say. "You got my letter," she finally managed. "I did," he nodded. "Took me a while to believe it was real." There was a long pause. Then he added, "I'm not mad anymore. Just surprised. I thought we were building something honest." "I was," Olivia said, her voice quiet. "I just didn't know how to share that part of myself without messing it up." Ethan nodded slowly. "Maybe we both needed time to figure out who we are without the masks." That night, they walked for hours through the snowy streets of town. No labels. No pressure. Just two people starting over, with truth between them this time. In the weeks that followed, they made a choice, to build something of their own. Not her empire, not his past. Something new. They bought a small building on the edge of town, an old cafe with creaky floors and a leaky roof. They fixed it up together, day by day. No investors. No press releases. They named it Second Spoon, a nod to second chances, to sharing meals, and to feeding more than just hunger. At Second Spoon, no one cared who you were before you walked in. Whether you wore a suit or work boots, you were welcome. The menu was simple. The message was loud, "You belong here." Ethan and Olivia worked side by side, not as server and CEO, but as partners. Every shift was a reminder, kindness had brought them together, truth had pulled them apart, and love, real, patient, and human, had brought them home. Second Spoon quickly became more than just a restaurant. It became a heartbeat in the town, a place where people came not only to eat, but to heal. Ethan had never led anything before. He wasn't a chef. He didn't have a degree. But what he lacked in credentials, he made up for with instinct and heart. He knew when someone needed a quiet booth in the back. He noticed when a regular hadn't shown up in a while and called to check in. His kindness set the tone for the entire space. And Olivia? She finally let herself slow down. For years, she had lived by calendar invites, shareholder meetings, and 15-minute lunches between interviews. Now, she woke up early to bake bread from scratch. She greeted customers by name. She laughed more. Worried less. And for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was truly part of something, not above it. Together, they hired people who others had overlooked, single parents, former inmates, immigrants starting over. Each staff member came with a story, and each one found purpose in the rhythm of the kitchen, the clatter of plates, and the quiet comfort of belonging. Ethan and Olivia weren't just building a business, they were creating a second family. The walls of Second Spoon were lined with Polaroids, birthday celebrations, late-night laughter, quiet hugs after hard days. No fancy decor, no polished branding. Just memories. Honest ones. They made mistakes. Burnt a few dishes. Had tough days. But they faced them together, with patience, humor, and an unspoken vow to keep showing up for each other. Their relationship deepened, not through grand gestures, but in the quiet consistency of daily life. A fresh cup of coffee left by the register. A shared look across the kitchen when the rush got hectic. A soft, "You've got this," whispered in passing. Over time, the community around them changed too. People started believing again, in second chances, in local places that cared, in the idea that maybe kindness was still alive. Ethan and Olivia had started as strangers. Then, partners. But somewhere between wiping down tables and locking up for the night, they became something more. Not just a couple. But a team. A foundation. A home, for each other and for everyone who walked through that door. A year after Second Spoon opened its doors, the little cafe had become a quiet landmark, not for its fame, but for its soul. Locals came for the food, but stayed for the feeling. Travelers passed through and left notes on the bulletin board. Stories were shared. Walls remembered. And on a calm spring afternoon, with dogwood trees blooming outside the windows, Ethan and Olivia stood at the front of the cafe, hand in hand, and said, "I do." It wasn't a big wedding. No designer gowns or grand speeches. Just a gathering of their chosen family, the cooks, the servers, the regulars, the friends they'd made through grace and grit. The ceremony lasted 15 minutes. The laughter that followed lasted all day. A few months later, they adopted a baby girl named Hope, a name that had quietly followed them through their journey, now made real in a pair of tiny hands and bright, curious eyes. Their apartment above the cafe was small, with creaky floors and mismatched furniture. But it was filled with warmth, books on every surface, coffee brewing every morning, baby toys scattered across the rug. Life wasn't perfect. But it was deeply, intentionally theirs. Ethan read bedtime stories to Hope after closing. Olivia woke early to prep the morning menu, often with the baby strapped to her chest. They shared responsibilities, sacrifices, and countless cups of coffee. Their love wasn't loud, it was steady. Present. The kind that didn't ask for attention but earned respect. And as the seasons passed, the community grew with them. More staff joined. More stories were shared. Second Spoon became a place where people celebrated milestones, mourned losses, found jobs, made friends, and even fell in love. What began with a single act of kindness in a diner bathroom had blossomed into something much bigger than either of them could have imagined. Not a fairy tale. But something better. Real life, beautiful, messy, full of second chances. And every night, as they turned off the lights downstairs and climbed up to their home above the cafe, they knew. They hadn't just built a restaurant. They had built a life worth living. Together, some love stories begin with fireworks. Others with perfect timing or a sweeping, cinematic moment. But Ethan and Olivia's story began with something much quieter, a simple act of kindness, offered without expectation. And maybe that's the part we forget sometimes. That love doesn't always knock on the front door wearing a tuxedo. Sometimes, it slips in through the side, holding a coat, offering a warm drink, or sitting quietly across from you in a half-empty diner. Their journey wasn't about grand gestures or fairy tale endings. It was about showing up, for each other, for the people around them, and for themselves. It was about honesty and patience and learning to love someone not for what they have, but for who they are when no one else is looking. They taught each other that trust isn't built in a day, it's earned in small moments, in difficult conversations, in the willingness to stay when things get uncomfortable. And perhaps most importantly, they proved that second chances aren't just possible, they're powerful. That it's never too late to start again, to love deeper, to believe in something real. Their story reminds us that healing doesn't come in a straight line. It comes through connection. Through community. Through finding people who see the best in you, even when you forget it's there. So if you've ever felt like you missed your shot, like your story is too messy or your heart too broken, remember this. Sometimes, the most beautiful chapters begin long after the first page. Sometimes, love finds you when you're not looking, but exactly when you need it. And sometimes, all it takes is a second spoon. If this story touched your heart, give it a thumbs up, it helps more people find it. And if you believe in second chances, leave a in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe, we've got another unforgettable story dropping tomorrow. Until then, stay kind, stay curious, and keep believing in the power of simple moments.